Good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Pizarski. I am the County Planning Director. We have Amari Williams in the back who administers the Cultural and Heritage Program through our department. I recognize a lot of you. Can you give me a raise of your hand if you have done this application before? Okay. And raise a hand for who had never done this application before. Okay. Great. So this is a very, well, nobody else comment on this, but I'm going to say it's a very simple application. We have taken a lot of time over the years to try to limit it down to just the very basic information that's needed. So we're going to go through it step by step, and feel free to ask questions. Just raise your hand if you have a question on any component that we discuss, and we can discuss it and sort it out. I will start by saying that our staff in the department are available as you are working on your application. If you have any questions or run into any problems, just give us a call, and we're happy to try to walk it through and work it through with you. So with that, we will get started with the application itself. This is the cover of the application. There are a couple of important things right off the bat. So the due date for the application is Friday, October 11th. An earlier version of the application might have mentioned October 4th, but it's not. It's October 11th. We've added a week to it. So congratulations, you have another week. And when we say October 11th, we mean 4 p.m., not after we get done work, not 6 o'clock at night. Is Omari going to be getting a phone call saying, I have it, I'm ready to drop it off? So 4 o'clock, please. And the reason we set that date is very important for us because there's a variety of things that have to happen to those applications in order for us to eventually get to award letters to you. And that timeline from October 11th to the end of the calendar year is really tight. So we can't have late applications. It screws up the whole process. So if you are running into a problem or you're worried you're not going to make the October 11th date, call Amari ahead of time and say, listen, this is my problem. This is my situation. You know, my CFO is on vacation for 2 weeks and I don't know what the numbers are, and so we're going to be late. And what Amari will be able to do is get the application in, get all the information we need before the 11th, and then if there's something supplemental that you need to add after that, we can maybe work that out. But the reason that date is important is because what Amari is going to do is take all of these applications. It's going to review them to ensure they're complete, that all the components are in there, that the grants review panel needs to review them. He is then going to scan them all in, and he is going to create PDFs that are sent out to all of the grants review panelists. So the applications are reviewed by a panelist of experts, often not from the county, so they are not familiar with your organization, and they're going to score these applications. They then meet collectively to go over all of the scoring and the applications themselves. Those scores are then given to the Cultural and Heritage Commission, which has a specific schedule for their meetings. They then review the scores and make funding recommendations to the county commissioners. The county commissioners have a very specific schedule, and then they make the awards, authorize the awards, and then grant agreements are drafted and letters go out. Usually in January, but certainly by the end of the first quarter. So that timeline is what is locking us in here. So we really need October 11th to be the date. Also, we only need one copy of everything. This has been said before. One copy. The easiest thing, although I'm sure it looks very nice to put it in a 3-ring binder and put a little cover on it, the easiest thing for us is if you just do not staple it, just use an alligator clip, put everything in the order of the checklist, put an alligator clip on it, because all it's going to happen is Amari's going to scan it through the copier. So if it has a million paper clips or staples in it, if it's bound, we're just going to tear it all apart. So yes, Greg.
Can we submit electronically?
You can if you want to. My recommendation is you hand deliver it. That's the easiest, safest thing. We know you're giving it to us. Here it is. We have it. But if you want to send it electronically, you can, if that's what you want to do. All right? What else? If you do not understand a component of the application and your primary language is Spanish, we do have a commission member who is fluent and can walk you through that process. Omari, I would say, is almost fluent or close to fluent, so he can probably help you with that too. But we definitely have a commission member who can cover it. All right, so this is a combined application for arts and history. However, our funding comes from two different sources for arts and history. So there are slight differences between arts and history. So wherever there's a difference, I'm going to describe it. Whenever it's the same, I'll point that out too. But, so what's on the art side, who can apply? Nonprofits or government agencies. Nonprofits need to be in good standing. They need to be properly incorporated with their tax-exempt notification, because what happens is, for our finance department, when you get an award, we're going to ask you for your tax-exempt status letter for our system. And so that has to be in place and ready to go. If you are in the process of getting it, then we can't award you anything at this point. You have to have that 501c3 status secure. All right? And then government agencies are government agencies, any component of the government. GOS only for organizations in Cumberland County, and on the art side, whose primary mission is arts. On the history side, whose primary mission is history. GOS, general operating support, has a higher level of scrutiny. So there are more things required in the application for a GOS app. What can be funded? Any publicly accessible, that's the important part, arts or history programming occurring in Cumberland County in 2025 calendar year. So January to December. Or operating expenses for nonprofits whose primary mission is arts or history. What cannot be funded on the arts side? Any capital expenses cannot be funded. Equipment with a 3-year shelf life or longer. Deficit reduction, scholarships, fundraising events, food and alcohol, foreign travel, and non-public events. So again, you see that reference to non-public. And on the history side, it's a little bit different. On the history side, capital expenses, including exterior maintenance or collection development or purchasing, deficit reduction, scholarships or endowments, fundraising events, food and alcohol, that's all the same, foreign travel, non-public events, non-New Jersey history. So if you're on the history side, your history component has to be relevant to New Jersey history. Also, typically not funded are genealogical projects unless they have a distinct impact on New Jersey history. And if you're not sure, then talk to us before working on the application. And then non-cataloged photography or inaccessible material. So if it's not accessible to the public, if the collection is not accessible to the public, we can't fund it. The public is the component. Does anyone have any questions on that? Is there a project that you fear may be ineligible for funding at this point? All right, good. Everything's fundable. We have consolidated everything into 3 grant types. So, and again, pretty straightforward. So you have special project. That is for a one-time event or program. You have general program support, which is for multiple events throughout the year, a series, a seasonal thing that you do each season, something like that. And then you have general operating. There are no caps on the request that you can make. However, recognize that the budget needs to be reasonable and not inflated. Or the grants review panelists are very skillful. They know the numbers, and they're looking for areas that may be artificially inflated. I will give you an example of an area of concern for them. There was an application, not in this county. All of you guys are good. There was an application in another county in which they were video recording their programming. And the selection of the videographer was that one of the board members knew somebody who did videography. And so they just got a quote from that person and went with that person. The panelists were concerned because there was no competitive bidding process. They did not try to get 3 bids to determine if that price was reasonable, if that price was ridiculous. Also, there was not really an arm's length consideration there. It was a friend of a board member who happened to do it, which raised concerns. So in that situation, what the panelists actually required of that applicant is that before funding was granted, they had to go out and get 3 bids. And that may have altered the budget. And so you might as well do the work ahead of time and make sure that the pricing that you're projecting in your budget is reasonable and has been based on competitive bidding in some fashion. One of the things that has come up recently is if grant funds are being used to offset salary expenses for a executive director or a member of your organization that is paid, then we need, as a matter of record, the timesheets that show that. So we need confirmation that if you're projecting you're going to pay that executive director, $4,000 out of the grant for work that they're doing related to this project, then when you submit your final reporting, we need to see the timesheets that show that you paid $4,000 to that person over this time period for this specific project component. All organizations can technically apply for one art and one history. So if you have the time and energy and the programs meet the eligibility, you can do an arts application and you can do a history application. As I said, there are no limits on the amount of funding, but be realistic in the budgeting. Grants are competitive, and you'll see later on in the presentation the criteria we use for determination of the scoring. Any questions on that? Everybody knows what category they're going to apply for? Okay. Match requirements. I have good news and I have bad news. There are no match requirements for 2025 again. So you do not technically have to match anything for your request. However, this is probably the last year that we're going to do that. Probably next year there will be match requirements. So just keep that in mind, because for instance, if you're proposing an event this year and you're asking for $11,000, let's say, for this program, and it's going to be a continuing program, and you're going to apply next year for $11,000, you better make sure you have a one-to-one match for next year, or else you're going to have to severely limit your programming next year. And that's my reference to why it needs to align with your organizational capacity. If in most cases you're going to have some type of match, for instance, if you're going to have food or alcohol at your program, You can't use grant money for it. You're going to pay for it out of your own pocket. That's a cash match. Show that in your application, because keep in mind these are competitive. So if there's an organization that has a lot of match and you're showing zero match, that could affect your score competitively. Okay? We harp on this every year. Acknowledgements are super important. If you get a grant fund through this program, there is specific language and specific logos that you're required to use to show that you got this funding. It's important for the state agencies that provide funding to the county, and it's really important to the county because, for instance, you will likely get a county commissioner at your event, and they're going to look at your program to make sure that they're given the proper credit for providing partial funding to the event. So let's give credit where credit is due. All right, so this is the way the process works. So applications are reviewed and scored by the panel, comprised of experts within arts and history, most of whom are not familiar with your organization. So in your narrative, you want to include a brief description of who you are and what you do, so that the panelists kind of understand where you're coming from. Based on the scores, awards are calculated by the Cultural and Heritage Commission and then authorized by the commissioners. Award letters and grant agreements are released preferably in January, that's what we shoot for, but certainly by the end of Q1. Applicants may appeal, there is an appeal process, award decisions within 2 weeks of the announcement, but only if they feel the application was misunderstood in some way. You cannot appeal based on dissatisfaction with the award amount. Okay, so if you asked for 11 and we gave you 7, and you said that's crap, you can't. You can have that opinion, but you can't appeal over it.
So how would we know that they misunderstood?
Because when you receive your award letter, you will receive a summary of comments from the grants review panelists. You will get something that says, they liked this about your application, they did not like this about your application. And if you feel that somehow your application was severely misinterpreted, then you can appeal. Okay? That almost never happens. Unless your application is very, very confusing, which can happen. Awards are distributed in 2 payments. When you receive your award letter, you will get a grant agreement. When you execute the grant agreement, you will be given a check for 75% of your grant award amount. You will then receive a second 25% check upon completion of the final report at the end of the year, or when your event is complete. All right, so in some circumstances, organizations that are really on the ball, if their funded event ends in September, at the end of September, they're reaching out to Amari saying, can I get my final report form, filling that out, submitting it to Amari, and as soon as that's accepted by us, we issue your final payment, your final 25%. Okay? The criteria used by the panel to determine your score is based on 5 criteria. Quality of the experience, so the level of quality of any art program or history program. Your audience engagement, is it interactive? Is it compelling to your audience? There is a quantitative component, so how many people are being impacted? So in other words, how many people, so the breadth, and then also the quality of the impact, so the depth of the experience. All right? And in fact, there are some panelists I've seen in the past who will actually take your request amount and then look at your projected audience and divide the request amount by your audience to determine how much you're asking for basically per person, per audience member. And that can potentially have an impact. They're also looking at the governance capacity of your organization. Do you have an active governing board? Do you have policies that are maintained and followed? You know, do you meet regularly? Do you have a diverse board that represents the audience that you're serving? Things like that. And then they're looking at the budget. So they're determining if the budget is reasonable. Is the amount being requested having the requisite impact to the community? So those are the 5 criteria. All right, so the first page that should be on the packet, the alligator clipped packet that you hand to Amari, is this checklist. All you have to do is follow the checklist. As long as you have something from the checklist and it's marked as in the packet, you're good to go. All right, so I'm going to briefly go through it, and then we have a few details. So, application checklist. There you go, that's this. So you're going to have this on the front page. Then you're going to have your signature page. Then you're going to have your narrative. Then Form A. Then your budget forms, B, C, and D, which we'll go over. Then your community chart, which we provide. You're going to include resumes of key staff. So who are key staff? If you are using artists and you know who those artists are, we should have biographies or resumes of them. If you do not know who your artists are, then in your narrative you should be explaining how you're going to select your artists. What criteria are you using? Again, it should not be, oh, Fred knows a guitarist and we're going to use that guy, right? It needs to be something that is open and public. We need a list of your board members, their terms, and their total length of service. So who's on your board, how long have they been on your board, and when does their current term expire? If they're 3-year terms, give us some of that. It would be great if you also included, now we do not provide a specific form, interestingly Atlantic does, that you have to fill out for this section. But if you can provide their occupation, and retired is not an occupation. So if you're retired, please tell us what they did before their retirement. That would be really handy to have and helpful. A copy of your bylaws if you are a first-time applicant. We just need it for our file. So if you're reapplying from previous year, don't worry about that. We already have it. Some type of audit or financial review, and all that text kind of describes, you know, what level you're at. If you're below 500,000 budget, then you don't need a full audit. You can just do a financial review. And but at a minimum, we want to see your 990 tax return. So if you include nothing else, just stick that in there so that we can see. All right. Copy of your board-approved ADA plan. We're going to go over that. Copy of a long-range plan if you are applying for GOS. Only if you're applying for GOS. This is where that higher level of scrutiny comes in. For GOS applicants, we want to see that you're doing long-range planning, strategic planning, and what your goals are over the next several years. And then copies of publicity limited to 10. So if you have brochures, or you have flyers, or you did printed ads, or you did billboards, we want to see examples of that. Okay? And that's it. Yes?
What about electronic publicity?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. So, and that's it. When you have all those items and you have little check marks next to them and everything's in the application, clip it, give it to Amari, you're done. Okay? Now we're going to go through some detail. All right, so this is your signature page. The information, you're going to put the basic information about your organization. When we ask for the contact person, the person we want there is the person doing the application. Because what will happen is when Amari goes to do the review for completeness, if something's missing, he's going to reach out to the contact person. And if your contact person is your executive director and had nothing to do with the application, and he says, hey, where's Form C? They're going to say, well, what are you talking about? So we need the person that did the application listed. Your contact information, email, phone, cell phone number, whatever information you can give us. Then there's some stuff regarding cultural codes and disciplines. They're just numbers that are in your packet. For the art side, on the history, you can ignore those. Your state legislative district. Your program summary should not be more than 100 words. That's your elevator pitch on what you're doing. And what we do with this is we have to send stuff up to the state, and this is what we use to describe the program that we're funding. And we are restricted on the amount of space we have to do that. So when we say no more than 100 words for this, we really mean it. A couple of sentences. All right, you can describe in greater detail in the narrative. And then you're going to select one of these three. You're going to put the amount you're requesting. So it's either going to be special project, GPS, or GOS. I think we've gotten a few in the past that have been, oh yeah, there's 3 numbers here. There should not be 3 numbers. One number. One number. Okay, and then you're going to have your director sign it. Okay, and date it, and that's your signature page done. And again, October 11th, not 4th. I'm using an old version. Your narrative. We have reduced this down to 4 pages. All right? No more than 4 pages. You're going to tell your story, not 8-point type, 12-point type. All right? You want to be concise. And basically, this is the heart of the application. You are telling us what you want to do, when you want to do it, who it's going to impact, and why you are doing it, particularly you as an organization. Where, examples of where you can run into problems. So if you are let's do Boys and Girls Club. I'm going to pick on you. You are a youth-oriented social services kind of organization. If you were to submit an application to us and say, you're going to do programming for seniors, that does not make sense. If your mission is youth services and you're proposing programming for seniors, why are you doing that, right? There could be a reason. Maybe you're partnering with a geriatric specialty nonprofit, and your kids are going to learn from another generation, and there's going to be multi-generational programming. Great, but you need to explain that, because if the panel just sees a youth services organization doing something that's not really their mission, they're going to start asking all these questions. If you don't know exactly the date of your event, then give us an idea. Say, all right, we don't know exactly what weekend, but it's going to definitely be after Labor Day, and we're going to try to do it in October if we can, right? If you don't know your musicians, if you don't know your artists, you can give us some idea. So you can say, if it's something, as far as gallery related, you can say we're going to do modern art, we're going to pull from the tri-state region for art services, and we're going to set up a committee to select the artists that are going to be involved, and this is the criteria they're going to use to do that selection process. So just to give the panel an idea of how you're going to do your program. Any questions on narrative? And we definitely, in the past, we've recommended a budget narrative. I think we've gotten to the point now where we really, insist on a budget narrative. Because you'll see in the budget forms, let's say marketing. Marketing's going to be one number. We only give you space to put a bulk number. Well, if that's $8,000, put in the narrative, that $8,000 is going, we're going to spend $2,000 on billboards and $1,500 on radio ads and and just give us an idea. Even if you're not 100% sure, this is projection. You're projecting what you'd like to do, if you get the money, if you get the full amount. All right. Publicity plan, it does not necessarily have to be a separate document. You can squeeze it into the narrative if you want, but basically we want to hear how you're going to be marketing your programming. So, Puerto Rican Festival, right? So, how do you market that?
We go radio, Mega, we go Wafa, we go Univision, we go
Right. So you can say, you know, we do it on television, we do it on radio, we do it through newspapers, we do social media. Great. Yep. You're going to put it on your Facebook. You're going to do some YouTube videos. You're going to do a TikTok dance with it. And I don't know. Well, we're not on TikTok, but maybe some of you are. But that's what we want to. That's what we want to know about. And really, the reason there is two things. Number one is if you're projecting in your audience figures that you're going to attract 5,000 people to your event, and then you talk about publicity and you say we're going to hand out flyers to local businesses to hand, that does not correlate, right? So we want to make sure that those two things correlate. The other thing is that some of our panelists are experts on marketing, and so they'll read your publicity plan and they'll say, hey, in the panel comments, suggest to them that they use this newspaper up in Gloucester County because that attracts exactly the audience they're looking for. And so they may provide recommendations to you through the panel comments. Okay? Your ADA plan. So this should be a separate document. No more than 3 pages. Again, we're trying to keep it simple. You want to put your mission statement. Why did I put MORD? Board approved policy statement. So you should have a policy statement that's been approved by your board that talks about your accessibility, right? Your program accessibility. And you should also have a board approved grievance procedure. So if you have an event and someone in a wheelchair goes to attend your event and they can't participate, and they go to one of your volunteers and complain, what is the procedure to handle that complaint? You should have something in writing that says a volunteer is to communicate with the executive director. The executive director is to take a written statement from the complainant. That written statement is to be reviewed by the board. The board has 30 days to make a determination, and then they notify the complainant on how they're taking corrective action so that that doesn't happen again. And that's it. That's your grievance procedure. And then describe how you, in your programming and marketing and your venue selection, what you do to make sure that everything is accessible as much as possible. And that's your ADA plan. An ADA plan something that does not work as an ADA plan is a piece of paper that reads, we are fully compliant with ADA, period. We need to know the details behind it. And we have gotten that in the past, where they say, we're compliant with the law, don't worry about it. Well, we do worry about it. Oftentimes, when we have the chance and the time, we will have your applications reviewed by a separate board specifically for accessibility. And those comments are then provided to the grants review panel to be considered in the scoring. So it's an important component for us. All right, Form A is your activities chart. So all we're asking for here is what you're planning to do next year if you know the dates, put the dates in, and then project the audience you'd like to see at that event. If you're using a venue that has 500 seats, 500 should be your attendance number. That's fine. If you're using an outside venue, like the county fairgrounds, you can always use the county fairgrounds. We're promoting that this year. We can hold, 4,000 people there. So if you feel like you can attract 4,000 people and you have the capacity for 4,000 people, put 4,000. Again, if you know your date, put it in there. If you don't know your date, put summer or a weekend in October, something like that, to give us an idea. And then we're asking for your current year. So, what have you done this year? What programming are you planning, so that we can see what that looks like. That's that form done. Your finance charts are broken into expenses, income, and fundraising. Right? The first one is expenses. We apologize ahead of time regarding these categories here. We have no control over these categories. Those are dictated by the state. But basically, if you are paying staff that are paid staff in your organization, you're going to use A, administrative, artistic salaries. Those are people working for you. Right? B would be anybody not working for you but are doing contractual services. Right? C is capital expenditures. We almost never get any requests for capital expenditures. 9 times out of 10, you don't have to worry about that. And then other operating expenses, marketing, phone and postage, travel, rentals, supplies and materials, insurance, technical production. That tries to catch everything else. If you're not sure which expense should go in which category, just call Amari and ask him. And as long as we know what's in there, we're okay. But that's where your budget narrative is important. If you put, there's only, one space for marketing, that should be all your marketing, is that one number. Explain in your budget narrative how you got to that number. All right? Same thing with, if we look at supplies, right? So supplies, if you're doing a kids program with watercolors, you have to buy watercolors and you have to buy paper and you have to, buy easels or whatever it may be, do a quick little, in your narrative, say, hey, supplies came out to be $600. We're going to do $300 in easels, and then the other $300 is going to cover watercolors and paper. Something like that. And again, keep in mind these are projections. They don't have to be exact, and they can alter. So when you do your final report, you're going to have the actual numbers, and it's okay if there's a difference. All right, so that's your budget. That's your, on the income side, in some cases, you're not going to have income. If it's a free event with no ticketing and you didn't do any fundraising for it, then you potentially could have zero. That rarely happens, yes.
The previous slide.
Yep.
Where it has the matching funds. There's
Right.
the matching funds, right?
So you,
So, we spent a lot of money on food.
yes.
So, which category we can put that matching funds? Do we have to break it?
Hospitality, there's one for food expenses. Okay? So you would just put under hospitality on the matching column, whatever that number was. It's down at the bottom right here.
Yeah.
All right? And keep in mind also, you don't have to match one-to-one in each category. If you're spending $600 on administrative salaries, your match doesn't have to show $600 in administrative salaries, just so long as at the bottom they line up. If we have match requirements, which we don't this year, but next year we probably will, so keep that in mind. Yep. Income side, admission, so if you do have ticket price sales, like for Kite and Color, you're going to put that number in there so we have an idea. And don't worry, if you make money off of the event, we're not going to ask for it back. It's okay if you make money on your event. Contracted service revenue, so rides or things like that, merchandising, and then we have contributed income, which is basically fundraising. So, and again, this is projected. So if you are going to try to approach a couple of businesses in Vineland and ask for a couple $100 from each of them to sponsor your program, then kind of if you're going to go to 3 organizations and ask $200 from each of them, put $600 in there as your projected hopeful fundraising income from corporations. And then we do ask if there's cash or loans, which almost there never is, and then we ask you for the amount you're requesting from us. So there's a line for that.
Question, Matt.
Yep.
So in ticket sales, for example, I realize you make a projection on what you're hoping to sell, but in the reporting period, like what if that needs to be proven, right? Like you say, oh yeah, 100 people came, so we sold 100 tickets, but are we supposed to also turn in?
No, you don't have to. No, you don't have to turn in ticket receipts. But if in your final report you indicated 100 people attended, and in your narrative you said that they were $10 tickets, then it should match up. It should be $1,000, right? So any anomalies are kind of what we'll question, but we just want to see, and that has an impact on with our funder, because what they do with that is they say our grant funds produced this much income for the state, for our organizations throughout the state. So it's important.
Real quick, just double
Yes.
checking it. On the one I have, it says requested in 2024 on the C&H award, but that's actually 2025.
It should
right?
be 25. Yes, what you're
Okay.
requesting for 25.
For the current government.
Yeah, that's just a typo.
Got it, all right.
All right, and then on this one, the income, we're asking like contributed income from corporations and businesses, a single number there. And going back to the example, if you're asking 3 businesses for $200 each, and you have 600 in that, what you're going to do on this column under corporations and businesses is you're going to identify the 3 businesses you're approaching and $200 each. Right? So we have an idea of who you're approaching for fundraising efforts. All right. Same with foundations and nonprofits. So if the Carly Foundation is you're going to approach the Carly Foundation, put that in there and how much you're asking for. Individuals, we don't know. That doesn't matter. Just a lump sum. And then any other government sources that you're approaching for funding, let us know who they are. If you receive state council funding or historical commission funding directly, you can't participate in the re-grant program. That's double dipping, so you can't do that. But I'll show you later towards the end of the presentation, there are some examples of funding sources that you can utilize.
And that would be just for like if it was a project, the support for that particular project, if you're asking for a special project, or you want the whole?
That's a tough question. So we would need to vet that with our funder. So if you're getting GOS support, but then you're applying for us.
Well, no, for arts special project.
Oh, well that would be fine then. You're okay. And you would just show for that specific project. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So the tourism commission's grant and like the marketing grant we get, like, so that will go in the government?
In the government, yes. Yep. All right. Then you have your community chart. And the reason we have the volunteers, the artists, and the live audiences grayed out is because you don't know what they are yet. You don't know what those demographics are yet. We will ask you to complete that in your final report. All we're asking for in the application is your board, your staff, and your volunteers. Okay? And so if you have 12 board members, you're going to put 12 here at the top, and then if 3 of them are African American, you're going to put 3 and go right down the list. These are the numbers for the county total, and then you're going to just kind of fill in there. And that is, again, going back to board governance, your organizational governance. We want to see who is represented on your board, and that there's inclusivity and that it's representative of the audience that you're serving. Okay? Any questions on any of that? That's basically the application. If you complete those components, you're done. If you want to submit it early, we will gladly take it. If you want to submit a draft of your narrative for review prior to your formal submission, you can email that to Amari, and we'll review it and give you our thoughts. If you're planning something as far as programming that is new and you're not sure about it, call Amari and talk to him, and he can tell you what he thinks and how we would, the level of support we would have for it. As far as other potential sources of funding, the New Jersey Humanities Council is really great. They have a different source of funding than anything that we provide, so it's not a conflict. And they have a variety of applications. Almost anything on the history or art side can be considered humanities in some way. So basically anything you're trying to do can probably be funded through the Humanities Council. And they have an application round coming up as well. So take a look at them. They're great to work with. They're very responsive, and they'll help you out. Even if you can't get it this year, they'll walk you through the process so that next year you have a really good application for funding. All right. Another one is if you're doing anything with disabilities, there's the recreation opportunities for individuals with disabilities, the ROID grant. Horrible name, but that's all right. ROID. Recreational opportunities for individuals with disabilities. Now this grant program is for government entities. However, you can partner with your municipality if you have a disabled program. It really concentrates on bringing the disabled community in with the non-disabled community jointly for combined programming. So that's really the crux of what they're trying to get to. You're getting?
I did.
You
last
did?
year, yeah.
Oh, congratulations. And you can see here, this is the press release. They funded $585,000. So there's a potential there. Another one is the Department of Environmental Protection. Again, it's primarily government entities. However, if you're trying to do some type of recreational programming on open space, or you're doing some type of nature programming or a artistic component that is outside, there's the possibility you could get funding from DEP, or you're partnering with a municipality that's going to get money from DEP. The one of them here is the Jake's Law Playground funding. We are working with the county library and to create a playground that will be themed around storytelling and books. And so that's benefiting the library as well as recreational opportunities for the county. And our award for that was $1 million. So there's good money available through the DEP. So if you're, that would,
The playground?
The playground's going to be in front of the county library on Route 49 in Bridgeton. It's right on property. And they're great to work with. So if you're not sure or you have an idea, give them a call and they'll talk it out with you and figure out if it's something they can fund or they can't. All right? And with that, this is all Amari's contact information.
Can I jump in?
You can jump in with whatever you want.
All right, just a couple of things. Thank you to Matt, first of all, for doing the presentation. I think it makes it just a whole much easier, and wealth of knowledge with everything you do. Absolutely. All right, so I sit in with the grants review panel, but my hands are tied and my mouth is shut. I can't contribute to it. I can only sit there. I take notes, which then I use to give the consent comments that I send out with the applications. So it's kind of frustrating sometimes because I want to be able to advocate on all of your behalfs. I love working with all of you, and the programming that you do is spectacular. But Matt made a very, very good point. These people do not know you at all. He said they might not know you. They don't know you at all, I'm telling you. And even the organizations that they see year after year after year, they still want you to make it crystal clear, like you could explain it to a 5-year-old. That's what you have to keep in mind. You want what you're going to be doing, the impact it's going to be having on the community, to be super crystal clear and easy, so they don't have any questions. Because, like I said, I can't answer anything for you. Even if I know the answers, I'm not allowed to do that. And so that's why I kind of wanted to take the time to explain that to you, because you might think you're being very clear or very easy to understand. Maybe run it by a family member or friend. Hey, does this make sense? Knowing what we're planning to do, because you only get one bite of the apple there, and I just want to make sure that you guys are. It's very clear that way. Matt also had mentioned like your board. That's another area that I keep hearing come up year after year after year. There's a couple of things that they're looking for. Diversity is huge. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, I cater to a certain community, so my board members are all of the same community. Well, diversity can be more than just racial or ethnic diversity. There's age, as Matt said, there's experience. So, you might have on your board a retired teacher, police officer, whatever, coming from different walks of life that'll bring different experiences. So use that to your benefit and really highlight those differences, because that makes you stand out. What else? Also, Matt was mentioning with that, resumes of the artists. They really like to see that, because sometimes you'll put something on there, we're going to work with a musician, but what are his or her credentials? Like, where do they come from? Why did you choose that person? That's really important. Growing your audience, that is another big thing. So especially for some of the organizations that have come multiple years, they want to see, okay, great, you had 5,000 people. How are you going to expand that? And not only in numbers, but also in outreach. Okay, so it might be 5,000 people, but it might be from one community. How are you reaching out to people outside of your community to grow your audience? Yes.
Like the outreach then has to be the Cumberland County, or like
No.
beyond the.
Outside of the area, which is a great idea. So for your event, Yogesh, you could say, we're marketing to New York, we're marketing to Washington, D.C., which I know you are, but they need to see that. I know that, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, but they do marketing outside of the area. I hope I'm conveying how much I want to be able to advocate, and I just can't. So that's why I want to tell you guys this stuff now. And then another thing that keeps coming up is measurement and metrics. How are you measuring your audience? Are you doing surveys, satisfaction surveys? Are you doing any kind of follow-up with people? Are you doing any kind of audience identification things? If you have those and you can include them in your application from previous years, please include them. If you have just the metric that you're going to be using, please include that as well. They really like to see that. And those are the notes that I thought of. But
Yeah, no, those are all
if
really, really
anything-
good points.
If anything else comes up, the last thing I will say, and then I'll turn it back over to Matt for any questions. Last year, the county started doing direct deposit. I know a lot of you have taken advantage of that. It's a lot easier. You don't have to deal with the mail. You don't have to deal with waiting for the checks as long. So anything that can make it smoother and easier is good. So I have these direct deposit forms. I'm gonna send them over by the sign-in sheet, and if you haven't signed in, please sign in. And thank you guys for all coming out. Thank you for the programming that you do. I really enjoy getting out to all your programming and trying to promote that out to the county as well, so thank you.
Mark, is that the current email address for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you, Amari. Yay! All right, any questions from anybody? Yes.
So I noticed a couple places it says about like photography, stuff from past events if you've been granted before. Are videos helpful? And if so, what's the best way to like, do we send a hyperlink in a PDF that they can click on? Like, is it easier to submit that via email or just stick with pictures and flyers?
I think the easiest thing would be if you can put it on YouTube and then provide the link in your narrative. That's the best way. I mean, we have in the past accepted, CDs or flash drives with
Yeah.
video. It's difficult for us to get that out to them. But if you can put it on YouTube and then just put the link in your narrative, they will look at it.
Okay.
And they are, that's another thing, they are checking your social media, because I forget what organization it was, but they were like, we have a very active social media, and like the last, we usually do the panel in the beginning of November, and like the last post was from May. So they are checking, and I'm like, again, I can't defend for anything. So they
Right.
are checking your social media. If you have a website, they are checking your websites, because they want to back up what you're saying. When Matt says they're thorough, they're very thorough.
Yeah, I
just-
previewed these grants for another county, and everything you're saying is true. Because when you're looking at someone's website and they haven't updated it, or they still have, last year's events listed, you're like, oh, I want it like you.
Right.
And the other problem I've noticed a lot of times is with the projected income, where it's just like up. And there's no explanation in the budget narrative of why you're projecting. You only took in 5,000 last year. Now you're saying we're going to bring 25,000.
Mhm.
Well, how are you doing that?
Right.
And that's something I think in your budget narrative you could describe. Describe this maybe for a second. You have this donor who's now giving this 20,000 extra.
Right.
And then also being clear on like who's doing the work, because in a lot of the applications I've read, it's just very vague, especially if there's no staff or there's very limited staff, and they're saying we're going to do all this stuff, and you're like, well, who's doing all this? Is it?
Right,
I think that's where you can either name people, like, well, our vice president's going to be handling this aspect of it, or we have a part-time staff person doing this, or we have XYZ volunteers, who will cover this. But sometimes it can just be so vague and it's like this huge program, and you're like, I don't understand who's doing the work, and it doesn't quite match up with, because the narrative has to match up with the budget, especially if you're paying out money to people or consultants, and then is it all justified, or is it, like I said, I've seen numbers that are just way out there.
And I think you can attest that it's a lot of work too for the panelists to go through.
It is.
I mean, how many applications did we have last year that they had to review in total?
A total 43.
43
I never had
applications.
to do that many, but yeah, but it is a lot, because I'll read through it first. And again, this is another county, but kind of do a quick read first to get a kind of general sense of the lay of the land, and then go back and then look at more detail, and then go back again and start looking at websites and social media, and then again seeing if everything makes sense.
Right.
Because again, you have no idea about these groups. at
Right.
all.
Exactly. All right. Yes, Yogesh.
Is there any, any resource available for the narratives? Because that's the thing, I'm challenged with my writing skills.
What do you think, Omari?
What I can maybe do is look through, cause like Rachel, I do review for Ocean County, Atlantic, and Gloucester. So I do that in those
Mhm.
counties. So I can look through some of my applications that really like kind of stood out
Yep.
and got good marks, and then maybe provide them.
Yeah, that would help.
Just provide a
because,
couple
like,
of good
yeah.
examples.
Mm-hmm. That sounds good.
I tried everything, Chat GPT.
Jeez.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
but you know, like that input has to be there, then only they can expand it, right? I
Right.
said write a 4-page narrative,
and because-
not enough data.
Yeah.
And because there's so much reading, you tend not to read it like, you know, you're grading an English paper. You know, it's more like, okay, I got it. But if there's, you know, annoying things like there and where, you know, that gets a little
Yeah.
like, but I think most, yeah, it does, but like I certainly wouldn't fault someone because they use a semicolon or something, because I'm not reading it that, I'm
Right.
looking at more the big picture, and
Correct.
it's just gonna be able to be implemented with the limited resources they have and things like that, so. I mean, that's not to say someone else wouldn't be like, well. I'm gonna
There's the
fault them
there's
because
always
this
the
is-"
possibility.
Yeah, you know, like I want.
Yep.
if
Yeah.
I'm
We'll try to
asking for
pull
money,
together some good samples.
I
and
should
put
be
'em-
able to justify that.
Either email them out to you or put them on the website or something.
Yeah, that's why it's important to make sure you sign in, because then.
Yeah, make sure that we have your emails so that we can send out to you.
If it's, especially if you're new, just put your email or come see me after.
All right, any other questions? Yes.
Is it possible to know what we all are doing so that maybe we can cross-market ourselves or support each other?
Do
Or
we
something
give
like
the
that?
list when we give the grant agreements? Do we include a list of all of the recipients?
We,
You received a list of recipients?
you've seen the list?
Yeah. We
I
haven't.
feel like,
Seems like there's-
I feel like.
We
it's-
will
Really-
we will provide a list of all of the awardees when you get your grant agreement this year, so you can see what everybody's doing.
Yeah, it's, well, that's, Greg brings up a good point, it's on the county resolution, so when it gets approved by the commissioners, when it gets approved by it, because it's public information, so we have no problem sending it out.
True, but I do like, the little elevator pitch for each one that we kind of
Yeah,
put that sheet.
That would be great, like a little synopsis or something, or
Mhm.
dates of an event.
Yep.
That would be great.
And it also has the primary contact for each organization, so it's good for you to have, because if you want to cross-collaborate, you can do that.
The other thing too is please, get your, as soon as you get your flyers, your, information, your dates, even if you have to save the date, please get it to us, because we wanna put it up on Explore Cumberland, and we're trying to make sure that's like a repository for everyone. That would be the easiest way for us to all be able to collaborate. So as soon as you have your date set, even if you just have your date, just get it over to us, because we do wanna promote it. That way.
The only other thing I'll also mention is that if you get an award and your program changes in some way, something falls through, something happens and you can't do what you were proposing to do, we do not want the money back. All right, so what you would do in that situation is that you would email Omari and say, I'm asking for a revision to the scope, right? And describe what you're proposing to do with your award if it's different than what is in the application. And Omari technically needs to approve it, but once it's approved, you can use your money for that. I did the workshop in Atlantic County last night on the same topic, and somebody said they were doing a parade around Halloween. And they said, well, what happens if the parade's not as big as we were thinking and we only spend half the money? How do we get the money back to you? And we were like, no, we don't want the money back. What you would do in that situation is, if you can't book the performers you wanted to book, try to book something else, or you can use it to increase your marketing. That's an eligible expense. Or you could have an additional event sometime between Halloween and the end of the year. There's a variety of ways you can use that money. But those alterations to your project need to technically be approved prior to doing them. So if it's not working out and you don't say anything and then you submit your final report and it's completely different than what's in the application, then Amari's going to call you and have a problem.
But everybody's been great about doing this.
Yes, so
Then
just
you
give
have-
us.
Then you have to give it back money, right?
No, we still won't take the money back, but we'll say don't do that again. All right, any other questions? All right, well, thank you, everybody. We're looking forward to seeing your applications this year. Thank you.